Hello, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Jason West. I'm the Vice Chairman of the North Korea Freedom Coalition. We'll be getting started in a moment. I just wanted to remind everybody that if you have questions, please, yes, Greg, you are muted for now. I'll be unmuting individuals as we go along. So if you have questions from the audience, you can pose them in the chat room. There's a chat room available to those on the web conference or joining via an app. So please post your questions there, and we'll do our best to get them to our panelists and our speaker. So without further ado, give me a moment, and I will turn it over to our chairperson, Suzanne Scholte.
All right. Oh, well, good evening. Good evening. I'm Suzanne Scholte, and I'm very honored to welcome you on behalf of the North Korea Freedom Coalition to tonight's session, which we'd planned to host in New York City during the UN Commission on the Status of Women. But I'm so grateful to Jason West for arranging this webinar for us so that we could proceed with this program, and want to express my thanks to Jason as well as our panel experts, Eiko Kawasaki of Korea of All, and Buwalda of the Jubilee campaign, Greg Scarlatoiu of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, John Sifton of Human Rights Watch, and our translator, Kyo Byun, for being a part of this program. I also want to thank Kenji Sawa, Holdafami, Sydney Kochan, Youngchul Kim, Dr. Pablo Klein and the Isabella Foundation, and Young Lee for their help in making this program possible. Also, we deeply appreciate the fact that although plans to travel to New York City were prevented due to the coronavirus, we were so grateful to the U.S. mission, the Republic of Korea mission, and the Japanese mission, who were ready to welcome us in New York when we reached out to them on behalf of our panelists. For background, the North Korea Freedom Coalition is a very diverse and nonpartisan group of individuals and NGOs of all ages and backgrounds from all around the world who join together with a single purpose: to promote the freedom, human rights, and dignity of the North Korean people. We are most proud to be close partners with the North Korean defector NGOs, and perhaps best known for organizing the worldwide annual Save North Korean Refugees Day, which occurred in 26 cities this past year, and the annual North Korea Freedom Week, which is coming up next month. We are involved in many activities to achieve our goals, including rescues, getting information into North Korea, and promoting awareness of the North Korea human rights issues, which is what brings us to today's event. Back in 2015, one of our coalition members, Betsy Kawamura of Hawaii, brought to our attention that the annual UN Commission on the Status of Women had never included any discussion of the human rights of North Korean women since its founding in 1946. Thus, we set out in late 2015 to be sure that what was happening to the women of North Korea would always be part of the discussion. In 2016, we had our first major breakthrough, thanks to the help of Julie Turner of the U.S. State Department and then U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, who hosted an event at the U.S. UN mission that gave 6 North Korean women the chance to speak out. Since that time, every year, the North Korea Freedom Coalition has organized a UNCSW session with witnesses and experts to focus specifically on the human rights of North Korean women, but also to offer practical ways to address their suffering. As our past witnesses have testified, repeatedly, North Korean women have borne the brunt of the human rights violations in North Korea. And in their words, they will tell you, the value of a North Korean woman in North Korea is the same value as a fly. A testament to their suffering is the fact that over 70% of the over 33,000 people who have fled North Korea are all women. Because of their bravery in speaking out, the UN Commission of Inquiry was able to conclusively conclude in February 2014 that the regime in North Korea is committing crimes against humanity and gross violations of human rights that have no parallel in the world. Our witness today is a living example of just that kind of bravery. Eiko Kawasaki has not only been a brave eyewitness, someone who escaped from North Korea, but she's also established the NGO Korea of All and chairs Action for Korea United Japan. She's currently involved in several initiatives to hold the regime accountable for their crimes against humanity. Because she will be speaking to a translator, and I want her to have as much time as possible, to tell her story. I'm going to ask that anyone who wanted to submit questions, as Jason said, to type them and send them in online, and then we'll take the questions for her after her remarks. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our eyewitness, Eiko Kawasaki.
여러분 안녕하십니까? 나는 일본에서 온 카와사키 에이코입니다.
여기서 멈춰주시면 제가. Hello everyone, I'm Eiko Kawasaki from Japan.
나는 제일동포 2세로 일본에서 태어나 1960년 17살 때 북한으로 갔습니다.
I was born in Japan, and I'm a second generation ethnic Korean, and I migrated to North Korea from Japan in 1960. I was 17 years old.
당시 일본으로부터는 제일조선인들이 북한이 지상낙원이라는 거짓 선전에 넘어가서 1959년 12월부터 1984년까지 사이에 93,440명의 사람들이 북한으로 보내졌습니다.
Between December 1959 and 1984, over 93,000 ethnic Koreans in Japan were sent to North Korea because they believed a false propaganda saying that North Korea is paradise on earth.
북한에 도착한 우리들은 절지에 우리들이 속았다는 것을 알았습니다.
The moment we arrived at a harbor in North Korea, we all realized that we were deceived.
우리들은 자유의 나라에서 아무런 자유도 인권도 없는 독재 국가로 바로 들여놨던 것입니다.
After traveling all the way from a country of freedom, Japan, we were dropped off at an authoritarian country where there was no freedom, no human rights, and no democracy.
북한이라는 것은 정말로 무서운 것이었습니다.
North Korea was a really terrifying place.
자유와 민주주의가 없을 뿐만 아니라 국도로 빈곤한 나라였습니다.
There was no freedom, no democracy, and extremely poor.
특히 여성들이 노인 위치는 상상을 초월하는 것이었습니다.
Especially the status of women was beyond imagination.
남전 여비가 선행하며 가정 내에서도 사회에서도 여성은 남성이 마음대로 따라야 하였습니다.
The predominance of men over women was overlooked in household as well as in society, and women needed to obey every single word that men say.
가정 내 폭력, 성희롱 같은 것은 공공연하게 진행되어 있었습니다.
Domestic violence was very prevalent, and sexual harassment was also taking place in public.
남자가 술에 취해 폭행하고 공중의 면전에서 젊은 여성을 덮치거나 가슴을 덥석 움켜쥐어도 누구도 주의를 주거나 책망을 하지 않았습니다.
Drunken men could be violent towards women in public and even hug them in public, but no one said anything towards the men who committed those crimes, and they could even grab women's breasts.
그뿐만 아니라 간부들은 자기가 마음에 드는 여자가 있으면 구가 유부녀이든 처녀든 상관없이 불려들여 자기 것으로 하였습니다.
In addition to that, a man who was in a management position higher up in the hierarchy, they could summon his favorite female worker, and whether she has a husband or not, and could take their own.
그리고 여성이 조선 노동자원이 되려면 돈이 없으면 자기 몸을 제공해야 했습니다.
If a woman from a financially poor background wanted to be a part of North Korean Labor Party, they needed to offer their body in order to be part of it.
여성이 유부녀인 경우에는 남편은 그것을 묵인하여야 했습니다.
In case she was married, her husband had to accept the practice without objection.
북한에서는 여성도 밖에 나가서 일을 해야 했는데 남자와 똑같이 출근을 하여도 모든 가사나 애 키우는 일은 여성만이 담당해야 했습니다.
In North Korea, women are also required to go to work, but they are also responsible for all housekeeping, child caring, and even work as hard as men do.
북한에는 전기가 없으니 가전제품 같은 것은 없습니다.
Because there's no electricity in North Korea, there's no home appliances.
수돗물이 오지 않기 때문에 여성이 물을 길러와야 합니다.
There is no water pipes that are connected, so the women need to go out further out to carry water and back to home.
정의 기저귀 같은 것은 보지도 못했으니까 가족들이 이따 남은 옷가지들을 기저귀로 씁니다만 그것을 빠는 문제도 대단한 것입니다.
There was no paper diaper, so they used, people in North Korea reuse people's old clothes, but washing them is not an easy task.
그렇기 때문에 여성은 남성이 몇 배나 일을 해야 했고 식사도 남자가 좋은 것을 먹고 여자는 그 나머지를 먹어야 했습니다.
Because of that, women needed to work so much harder than men. In addition to that, they couldn't even eat the main food. They needed to wait until the men finished their meal and take the leftover.
또 결혼을 하면 남편의 부모, 특히는 시어머니의 등살에도 견뎌야 합니다.
And after they get married, they needed to tolerate harsh bullying by their parents-in-law, especially the mother-in-law.
일본에서 간 사람들은 이러한 사회의 양상에 깜짝 놀랐고 아연실색하였습니다.
People who left from Japan to North Korea, they were so shocked by how people lived in this society.
김일성은 제일조선인들을 동포애의 따뜻한 정으로 맞이하겠으니 아무것도 가지지 말고 입은 옷 그대로 배에 오르기만 하면 먹을 걱정, 입을 걱정, 주택, 직업, 교육, 병치료 등등 모든 것은 아무 걱정 없이 보장한다 라고 하였고 저 청년은 북한은 지상낙원이다 라는 선전을 대대적으로 하였습니다.
Kim Il-sung said the ethnic Koreans from Japan, they will be welcomed with warm-hearted, brotherly love by their own country, North Korea. And he said they don't even need to bring anything but just clothes they are wearing. And they will be provided with accommodation, job, education, medical services. And he also guaranteed that they will have everything they need. But this was total false propaganda that North Korea is a paradise on earth.
그러나 그것은 모두 거짓말이었습니다.
But they were all lies.
우리들이 간 북한 땅은 철저한 계급 사회였습니다.
The North Korea that we went to was a strict class society.
기국자는 그 제일 아래쪽에 놓여 있어 참기 어려운 차별 속에서도 숨도 바로 쉬지 못하고 살아가야만 했습니다.
And we were placed at the bottom of the bottom, and we needed to live with unbearable discrimination. I couldn't even breathe.
처음 한동안은 정해진 사람 외에는 기숙자들과 말도 섞지 않았기 때문에 물론 결혼도 하지 않았습니다.
In the beginning, the locals would not talk with us, and also we couldn't even marry with the locals.
거주지나 직업의 선택의 자유는 없었고 모든 책임적인 지위는 차지할 수 없었으며 일체 여건으로는 될 수가 없었습니다.
There was no freedom to choose our own job or place to live, and also we couldn't take any managerial role such as army or police force.
기국자는 저기에는 군인, 경찰, 교원 등으로도 될 수가 없었습니다.
We couldn't join the army or the police force in the beginning.
기숙자들에게 허용되는 것은 노동력과 기술을 제공하는 것뿐이었습니다.
The only jobs that are allowed for us was just provide our physical labor and also just physical technology.
북한의 정치 경제 상황은 날로 나빠져 갔고 김일성이 죽은 다음 드디어 대량 아사히 시기로 줄다름 쳤습니다.
The political and economic situation in North Korea got worse, and after Kim Il-sung's death, it hit the bottom.
식량 배급에만 매달려 있던 사람들은 배급이 전폐됨으로써 속속 굶어 죽어갔습니다.
A vast number of people actually starved to death, and people who survived off from the ration system, they starved to death because there was no food available for them.
수년 동안에 수백만의 아사자를 낸 나라는 이 세상 어디에도 없습니다.
there is no country on earth that has had millions of people die in just a couple of years.
집 밖에도 안에도 시체가 나뒹굴며 사기, 협잡, 강도, 살인, 심지어는 사람이 사람을 잡아먹는 참상까지 벌어지고 이 세상의 악이라는 악은 다 소용돌이 쳤습니다.
There were dead bodies everywhere, inside a house, outside of house, and there were theft, robbery, murder, and any evil that you can even imagine of this world happened all together, and it created chaos. People even ate humans.
이런 참상 속에서 나는 왜 정신이 잘못되지 않고 남아있는지 자기 자신의 정신 상태를 의심했습니다.
I doubted my own mental state because I witnessed all of these, but I didn't go crazy seeing all these happen.
그리고 그 나라를 버렸습니다.
Finally, I abandoned my own country.
목숨을 걸고 국경을 넘어서 2004년에 살아서 일본으로 돌아온 나는 제일 먼저 한 권의 책을 썼습니다.
I risked my life to cross the border of North Korea, and in 2004, the first thing that I did after coming back to Japan alive was to write a book.
이 책은 나의 전기가 아니라 나와 같은 북성선을 타고 간 제일동포 기육자들이 어떠한 운명의 길을 걸었는가를 단편집과 같이 편찬한 것입니다.
That book was not my biography. It was a collection of short stories about people I shared a journey with on the boat to the North Korea from Japan, and I just wrote about their experiences.
그 다음에는 법을 통해서 60년 전에 실시된 북송 사업이 잘못이었다는 것을 인정시키기 위한 여러 가지 활동을 하고 있습니다.
Since then, I have dedicated my life to correct the wrongdoings, along with the legal efforts, to correct the wrongdoing of North Korea.
나는 이 활동을 통해서 북한의 독재 정권을 때려부시고 2,500만의 학대받고 억눌린 사람들에게 자유와 민주주의를 가져다주고 한반도를 통일하는 사업의 일각을 담당할 것입니다.
Through my work, I want to destroy the North Korean dictatorship. I want to bring freedom and democracy to 25 million oppressed individuals who are living in North Korea.
한반도가 통일되면 북동아시아의 평화가 오고 나아가서는 전 세계의 평화를 가져오는 커다란 힘이 될 것입니다.
When the two Koreas unite, it'll bring peace to East Asia and also to the globe.
전 세계의 여성 여러분,
to all the representative of women on earth,
지구 인구의 절반은 여성입니다.
so half of the world population is women.
여성들이 하려고 하면 못 해낼 일이 없습니다.
When we stand up together, we can do anything.
여러분, 나를 도와주십시오.
Everybody, please help me.
21세기 오늘 현재 자유가 무엇이며 민주주의란 무엇인가를 알지도 못하고 북한의 여성들을 알지도 못하는 북한의 여성들을 구출하고 평화로운 세계를 만들기 위하여 나를 도와주십시오.
Please help me to save those who are in North Korea, the women in North Korea who don't even know what freedom means and how democracy works in this 21st century. Please help me to build a peaceful world. Very much.
NGO 모두 모이자 대표, AKU Japan 대표이사 Kawasaki Eiko.
Eiko Kawasaki, the president of Korea Wall. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kawasaki. That was very powerful testimony. I do have a couple of questions for you. The first one is you mentioned that in your testimony that you wanted to see the end of the dictatorship. How do you think that can be accomplished? Can it be done peacefully to bring about regime change in North Korea? What would be your recommendation and how that could be accomplished?
북한의 독재 정권이 무너지려면 어떠한 노력이 필요한지 생각하시기에 어떠한 아이디어가 있을지 물어보셨어요.
수장, 북한의 인권 문제를 해결할 때가 왔습니다.
It is time to solve the human rights issue in North Korea.
모든 조건이 구비됐습니다.
We have every conditions ready.
북한의 김정은이
Kim Jong-un in North Korea.
지금 공포에 떨고 있습니다.
Right now, he's in biggest fear ever.
전번에 미국은 이란의 군사령관을 살해했습니다.
A couple of months ago, U.S. government killed a government official in Iran.
그것을 보고 김정은은 지금 공포에 떨고 있습니다.
Because he watched that happen, Kim Jong-un is in big fear.
자기도 살해되지 않겠는가고.
Because he's questioning he might be get murdered.
그렇기 때문에 그 일이 있은 후에 일정한 기간은 김정은이 밖으로 나타나지 않았습니다.
So after that happened, Kim Jong-un never showed himself in public.
북한의 경제는 금년 말이면 거덜이 납니다.
By end of this year, I expect the North Korean economy will collapse.
북한은 더 이상 지탱할 힘이 없습니다.
North Korea cannot sustain.
지금 중국은 코로나 바이러스 때문에 나라가 뒤죽박죽이 되어 있습니다.
And China, the country itself, it's in a huge chaos because of coronavirus.
시진핑은 자기의 지위를 보존하지 못할까봐 지금 야단치고 있습니다.
And Xi Jinping is also in fear because he might lose his position because not managing coronavirus well.
지금 이 복잡한 중국 상황에서 시진핑이 북한 문제까지 주의를 돌릴 수가 없습니다.
So that suggests that Xi Jinping cannot chip in anything in regards of North Korean issue.
또 중조 국경은 완전히 차단되었습니다.
And then the border is closed.
북한에서 아직은 코로나 바이러스 환자가 없다고 공식적으로는 발표하고 있습니다만 지금 현재 7,000명 내지 1만 명 이상의 환자가 나졌다고 합니다.
Officially, in public record, North Korea says there is no patient with coronavirus in North Korea. But I know that there are at least 7,000 to 10,000 patients in North Korea.
이제 북한 내에서 코로나 바이러스 환자가 많이 발생하게 되면 백성들은 가만히 안 있을 것입니다.
If there are more patients with coronavirus in North Korea, the people in North Korea will not just stay silent.
그렇기 때문에 나는 때가 왔다고 이야기하는 것입니다.
Because of this, I think it is time.
수잔, 트럼프 대통령에게 한 번만 다시 힘을 써달라고 부탁해 주시죠.
Suzanne, I really assert you to help me to say something to Donald Trump.
다시 한 번 트럼프 대통령이 김정은을 다시 만나서 다시 한 번 트럼프 대통령이 김정은을 만나서 두 가지 길을 제시하는 것입니다.
I suggest President Trump meet with Kim Jong-un one more time and suggest two ways to choose.
김정은이 목숨을 건지겠는가? 정권을 버리겠는가?
Whether he will save his life or abandon his dictatorship.
둘 중에 하나라고.
Just choose either of those options.
그렇게 하면 김정은은 꼭 자기 목숨 건지겠다고 할 것입니다.
And Kim Jong-un, I'm 100% sure Kim Jong-un will choose to save his own life.
김정은이 정권을 내놓겠다면
When Kim Jong-un abandons his dictatorship,
나는 그때는 김정은이 목숨을 살려줘도 된다고 생각합니다.
I think if we can save his life.
김정은이 북한에서 살지 못하겠다면 그 어떤 제3국에 가서라도 이 한계 시민으로 살아갈 수 있는 길은 열어줘도 된다고 생각합니다.
If Kim Jong-un doesn't want to live in North Korea afterwards, I think it's okay to open up a door for him to live in a third country, just a regular citizen.
만약 김정은이 정권을 포기한다면 일정한 기간, 내 생각에는 3년 내지 5년 유엔의 감시하에 들어가야 된다고 생각합니다.
I think after Kim Jong-un abandoned his dictatorship, he needs to go under the supervision from UN at least for 3 to 5 years.
그런 조건에서 북한 사람들이 자유가 무엇이며 민주주의가 무엇이며 인권이 무엇이며를 좀 알게 될 것입니다.
Under this condition, people in North Korea will know what freedom means, what democracy means, and what human right means.
그 다음에 일반 선거를 실시해야 할 것입니다.
And after that, I would suggest to do elections.
통일은 그 다음입니다.
Unification happens afterward.
지금 한국 대통령 문재인 씨가 하고 있는 것처럼 두 정권을 그냥 놔두고 연반제를 실시한다. 이런 것은 있을 수가 없습니다.
As the current President Moon Jae-in is suggesting, there will be no United States of Korea. That can't be possible.
역사의 새로운 막을 열 때가 되었습니다. 그 역사의 막을 내릴 주인공 트럼프 대통령이 해주셔야 합니다.
So it is the right time for open up the door of a new chapter of this history, and I believe the role of the President Trump is very important in this.
이런 의견을 트럼프 대통령에게 전달해 주십시오.
Please pass along my message to him.
Okay. Well, he just brought on board a tremendous person who is now the ambassador for global justice, Morris Tan, who's a Korean American, a wonderful, wonderful person who's written about prosecuting North Korea, prosecuting the Kim regime. I just mentioned that to her. But also, I have a couple more questions. And the first one is from one of our guest listeners wants to know, how did she escape from North Korea? And while you're translating, I do want to check the screen. My screen is blank. Is that? I just want to make sure because I can't see Kawasaki anymore.
Oh, that is very strange because our webcam's actually on. Let me just do one more time.
Can you see? Jason? Can you see? Yeah, now I can see you great.
Okay, great.
Yeah, for some reason I couldn't see it. So the first thing was you could mention to her that there's a person that's now at the State Department who's handling global criminal justice. And he actually wrote a book about the international law and pertains to North Korea. But the question I have for her, you just mentioned that to her, but the question I have for her came from one of our guests who wanted to know how did she escape from North Korea? And I do have several more questions. So
첫 번째 질문 또 하고 싶으신 거는 어떻게 북한을 탈북하셨는지.
1994년에 김일성이 죽었습니다.
In 1994, Kim Il-sung died.
김일성이 죽었을 때 나는 기대를 좀 걸었습니다.
After his death, I had some kind of expectation.
그때는 이미 유럽의 사회주의는 다 무너졌을 때니까요.
Because the communism in Europe, it was already vanished.
저와 친구 한 분이 나를 찾아와서
So
내하고 친구 한 분이 나를 찾아와서
So one of my friends came to me.
이 나라가 얼마나 갈까 질문을 했습니다.
And then the person asked me how long this country will go on.
그래서 나는 3년 아니면 오래 가면 5년이 갈까요? 이렇게 말했어요.
And my answer was 3 to 5 years.
그런데 그분은 아니 나는 그렇게 생각하지 않아. 이 나라는 좀 더 단단하게 얽혀 있어. 이렇게 말했습니다.
And then the person told her, I don't think so. This country has a stronger foundation, so it'll go on.
그분의 견해가 옳았던 것입니다.
And the person was right.
나는 너무 쉽게 생각한 거죠.
I was very naive.
김일성이 죽은 다음에 김정일이는 2,500만 국민들을 몽땅 버렸습니다.
After Kim Il-sung died, Kim Jong took over the regime, and then he abandoned all of his people.
배급에만 매달려 살고 있던 국민들은 배급이 전폐됨으로써 아사의 길로 들어갔습니다.
And then there was no food because a lot of people were just dependent on the ration system.
한쪽에 온 나라에 굶어 죽은 시체가 나뒹구는데 김정일은 무엇을 했습니까?
So Kim Jong-il didn't do anything when there were so many dead bodies all over the place, on street, everywhere.
김정일은 자기 애비 김일성의 묘지를 만들기 시작했습니다.
Kim Il-sung started to build the tomb for his father.
온 나라의 건장한 청장년들은 다 평야에 데리다가 그들에게만 먹이면서 애비의 묘지를 건설하기 시작했어요.
He took every single male, like who are able to work, like physically able to work, to Pyongyang and started to develop the tomb.
그것을 봤을 때 나는 그 나라에서 마음이 딱 떨어졌습니다.
When I saw that, I decided to abandon the country.
이상 이 나라에 있을 필요가 없다.
I can't be with this country.
나라 밖으로 나가서 내 목숨을 잃는 한 이서로 나라 밖으로 나가서 세계상 사람들에게 이 참상을 알려야 한다.
Even though I needed to risk my life, I decided to go out of the country and then share what I've seen.
그렇게 해서 많은 사람들의 도움을 받아서 이 나라를 바로잡아야 한다.
So I wanted to get a lot of help from a lot of people to correct the regime's crime.
그래서 2003년에 탈북을 하였습니다.
So I defected from North Korea in 2003.
Okay. Another question from one of our guests wants to know what Ms. Kawasaki thinks is the most pressing issue for women in North Korea. What is the most pressing issue? What would be the number one thing? Domestic violence, single mothers, sexual violence, poor health care, access to reproductive rights. What is, if she had to pick one issue of all the atrocities that all the violations they're facing, what would she think would be the number one that's the most pressing issue?
북한 여성들이 겪고 있는 많은 이슈가 있잖아요. 폭력 이슈도 있고, 뭐 성적으로 폭력받는 이슈도 있고, 그것 중에서 딱 하나만 고르신다면 어떤 게 가장 중요하고 가장 심각한 문제인지.
그거는 남전여비 사상이죠.
It's a predomination men over women.
모든 것은 거기에 귀결된다고 생각해요.
Because I think everything concludes to that concept, men over women.
남자를 우선이고 여자는 그 밑에라는 그 사상이 모든 사회에 그 여자가 차별받는 기초가 되니까요.
They put men first and the woman is always second, and everything that's happening in North Korea has found like that's the foundation for every single action.
I see. I've got another question that just came in. Question about the coronavirus. One question is there any particular dangers that the women of North Korea face because of the coronavirus? And then is the virus all over the country or is it centered in one particular area?
코로나 바이러스 관련한 질문인데요. 코로나 바이러스가 북한에 있는 여성들에게 어떤 위험을 가지고 있는지 첫 번째고, 두 번째는 바이러스가 아까 7,000명 정도 감염됐다고 하셨는데 이게 전국을 말씀하시는 건지 아니면 한 지역에 집중이 되어 있는지에 대한 질문이에요.
코로나 바이러스가 여성들에게 중요합니다.
네.
그것은 북한이 약이 없고 그런 조건에서 위생 상황이 상당히 나쁜 조건에서 아마 여성들과 어린이들이 코로나 바이러스에 제일 큰 타격을 입지 않겠는가 생각하고 있습니다.
Because there is no medication and the hygiene is very, very poor, I believe that women and children will be suffered the most by coronavirus.
북한은 단동을 통해서 중국에서 코로나 바이러스를 옮겨가지고 온 사람을 총살했다고 합니다.
단동이요?
단동이라는 게 중적 국경이거든요.
So there were some, the North Korea government killed the person who brought coronavirus to Dandong, which is the city at the North Korean border.
그렇게 해서 막으려고 애를 쓰고 있지만 지금 국경영선 사람들 그리고 군부대에 퍼지고 있다고 합니다.
They are trying to stop it by killing people who are infected, but the coronavirus is the most severe amongst the soldiers right now in the army base.
I see. Well, I have another question about your book. You mentioned that you put together some testimonies of people that you knew when you went back to North Korea. Can you share with us about a couple of those stories, but also how people can get your book? Is it just published in Korean and Japanese, or what language, and how can people get a copy of your book?
그 책에 관련된 질문인데
네.
저서 관련해서요. 거기에 나와 있는 그 쓰신 이야기 중에서 몇 개만 조금 나눠주시는 거랑 두 번째는 이 책이
책 가져와야 되는데
책이 한국말로 되어 있는지 영어로 되어 있는지 아니면 일본어로 되어 있는지 책을 구매하고 싶으면 어떻게 구매할 수 있는지에 대한
네.
질문이에요.
책은 일본어로 발간됐습니다.
I wrote the book in Japanese.
한국어로 한 것도 있는데 한국 출판사에서 출판을 해주지 않습니다.
It was translated in Korean, but there was no publisher in Korea would like to publish. So it
내가
never came out.
오래전부터 영어로 번역하자고 했는데 그건 하지 못했습니다.
I wanted to translate it in English, but it never happened.
한국인이 영국에 있으면서 내 책을 번역하겠다고 했는데 그 무슨 박사라고 해요. 근데 그 사람은 뭐라 했는가? 내 책을 가지고 자기하고 같이 쓴 걸로 하겠다. 공저로 하겠다. 이렇게 그래서 이거는 저작권 침해가 아니나요. 그래서 내가 그만두겠다고 했습니다.
So there was one person in Britain. He was a doctor in something, and he wanted to. He suggested to help me to translate this book, but he wanted to be a co-author, and I thought that was violation of my rights. So I said no.
그래서 오늘까지 영어로는 하지 못하고 있습니다.
So I don't have my book in English until now.
나도 참 안타깝습니다.
That's very sad.
Yes. So it's in. Now let's clarify. So it was published in Japan.
Yes.
But has it been translated and published in Korean or just
No.
Just okay.
There was no publishers. They won't.
I'm sorry?
There was no
publishers
willing to publish those books in Korea.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that we definitely need to help Ms. Kawasaki, because has an incredible, brave story to tell, and she's such a strong advocate for the people of North Korea. So it's something we definitely need to look at to get her story out.
번역해서 한국에서 출판하는 거 도와드리고 싶다고.
감사합니다.
Thank you so much.
그랬었으면 좋겠어요.
I have another question. I know we're almost out of time, but we have another question from one of our guests, and that is wanted to ask, how does she perceive that North Korean women are being treated by the international community, once they escape? So that would be, how are North Korean women treated, once they get to South Korea? Most of them are in South Korea, but also in Japan, the United States, where they're resettling. How are they being treated?
북한 여성이 국제사회에서 어떻게 대우받는지 아시는 대로 말씀해달라는 건데, 북한 여성들이 한국에도 있고 일본에도 있고 여러 군데 있잖아요. 탈북한 북한 여성들이 국제사회에서 어떠한 대우를 받고 있는지에 대해서.
탈북한 여성들 중에서 일본에서 온 사람들은 괜찮지요. 그런데 탈북한 여성들 문제로서 가장 큰 문제는 중국에 있는 여성들입니다.
The biggest issue, the country that I'm sorry, the country that North Korea, for the women who escaped from North Korea, that has been suffering the most is actually it's China.
나는 2003년에 탈북을 해서 1년 반 동안 중국에 있었기 때문에 중국에 있으면서 탈북한 여성들이 얼마나 참혹한 대우를 받고 있는가 하는 걸 직접 보았습니다.
I directly witnessed how the women are treated in China, like especially the North Korean defectees, because when I escaped North Korea in 2003, I stayed in China for over a year and a half. So I saw it with my own eyes.
살겠다고 강을 건너온 여성들을 붙잡아서 층을 가릅니다. 값을 매깁니다. 그렇게 해서 그 값에 따라서 다 팔아먹고 그것을 같은 조선족이 합니다. 얼마나 안타까운지 모릅니다. 그러나 나는 그걸 중국에 있을 때 그 문제를 문제시 삼으면 내가 북송되기 때문에 말하지 못했어요.
These women cross border risking their own life, but after they cross the border, these Koreans who've been living in China, they will set price for each of them, and then they will sell them by their price. And I saw that happening over and over again, but I couldn't speak up because my life was at risk.
중국은 지금 북한의 지하자원 때문에 김정은하고 결탁해서 이 탈북한 사람들의 인권을 완전히 짓밟고 있습니다.
Because there are a lot of undiscovered underground assets in North Korea, and China is ignoring all these human rights issues.
그렇기 때문에 빨리 아까 내가 말한 것처럼 북한의 문제로 빨리 해결해야만 이 모든 문제가 풀립니다.
Because of this, I truly believe that we have to tackle the issue, what's happening in North Korea, to solve and free women in China and their human rights.
수잔, 나를 도와주십시오.
Suzanne, please help me.
Well, we are. I'm so proud of you. So honored to know you, and thank you.
감사하다고.
수잔, 내가 하고 있는 법적 투쟁에 대해서 좀 이야기할까요?
Can I talk about any legal situation?
Well, actually, our next panel is coming up. But I was going to say that I know that you have several lawsuits pending to hold the regime accountable, which I mentioned in the beginning, and that is included in her bio that was posted for everyone to see. But any other follow-up testimonies, any other follow-up information she would like to add, that would be fine. I know because we're about, we have, let's see, okay, I just got to know, we do have time. We have one more question. I have to ask you about Free North Korea Radio, but we do have one more question. 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and the UN COI report, published North Korea human rights every year. Oh, how did you cooperate? How do you cooperate with the outside world? In other words, they talked about the UN COI. Did she give testimony for the UN Commission of Inquiry? They were just asking about
UN COI. Did she give
about the Commission of Inquiry, about how she cooperates and works internationally. That might be a good point for her to bring up the legal issues that she's working on. How's she working, in other words, with the international community on pressing on these issues?
Okay. 이 이슈 관련해서 국제사회랑 어떤 식으로 일하고 하고 계신지 그냥 전체적으로 설명해 주시면은 좋을 것 같아요.
나는 이 북한의 참상을 국제사회에 호소하거나 내가 이런 피해를 입었습니다. 그런 말만 하는 이런 활동으로는 북한 문제가 해결되지 않는다고 생각합니다. 이 사람들의 자유를 빼앗고 권리를 짓밟고 하는 대상에 대해서는 법으로 다스려야 된다고 생각하고 있습니다.
I think just sharing my story or speaking up itself, it would not damage the North Korean dictatorship. I think they have to bear legal responsibility.
그래서 제일 먼저는 이 문제를 재판을 하자 했었어요.
So first approach I took is let's take it to trial.
그게 2014년경이었는데,
and that was around 2014.
휴먼 라이츠 워치 일본 대표 도이카나의 도움으로 같이 하자고 했었거든요.
I worked with President of Human Rights.
휴먼 라이츠 일본
Human
대표.
Rights President of Human Rights in Japan, 도와나카?
도이카나에.
도이카나.
Yes.
그래서 도이카나에가 변호사단을 만들어줬어요.
So he gathered lawyers as a group who can help me.
우리 변호사단이 한 10명 됩니다.
And there are about 10 lawyers in that group.
그래서 변호사들이 토론한 결과 그때로서는 재판을 못한다고 했어요.
And their conclusion was we can't take this to a trial or to the court.
그래서 일본 변호사연합에다가 일본 변호사연합은 일본 전체 3만 명의 변호사들이 소속해 있는 단체입니다.
So we took it to Japan Lawyer Association, which is an association with over 30,000 lawyers in Japan.
거기 인권과에다가
So we took it to Human Rights Department.
인권구제 신청서라는 걸 제출했습니다.
And we submitted human rights, I don't know, like saving human rights form. It's a form that they
그것은 10명의 탈북자와
and it included 10 North Korean defectees,
1명의 제일동포.
and 1 Korean Japanese.
그 사람은 본래 조청령 간부를 하던 사람입니다.
and he was part of North Korea's government.
11명의 사람들이 원고가 돼서
So 11 people was the plaintiff.
상대 대왕을 피고로는 일본 정부, 북한 정부, 조총련, 일본 적십자, 북한 적십자 국제위원회 그 6개 기관을 상대로 신청서를 제출했습니다.
And then we sued 6 organizations, including Japanese government, North Korean government, and I actually don't know the name of this organization in English, but they are all political parties that crimes that committed.
The pro-Japanese, pro-North Korea Japanese group, yeah, Suzanne, yeah, that's good. Well, I know we need to get to our next panel because our next panel is going to be discussing recommendations. But I did want to say before you leave the U.S., I definitely want to do an interview with you with Free North Korea Radio, and it's going to be all in Korean. It will broadcast it into North Korea. We're broadcasting into North Korea every morning and every evening, but we have a special program called Coming to America, where we interview people from North Korea who visited the United States of America to tell their stories, so that people back in North Korea find out that we love North Koreans. Americans care deeply about North Koreans. And it's a way to open up the minds of North Koreans who've been brainwashed from childhood that we hate them and we're their enemy, which is just a lie. It's a wonderful program. I'd love for her to be interviewed before she leaves.
그 미국 떠나시기 전에 커밍 투 아메리카라는 라디오 프로그램이 있는데 수잔 씨가 인터뷰하셔가지고 이게 북한에 방송이 된대요. 그래서 북한에 있는 이제 그 마인드 교육 받으신 분들을 조금 더 변화시키려고 하고 계시는 건데 인터뷰에 응하실 계획이 있는지.
괜찮습니다.
She will love to do that.
Okay, we'll do it. Great. Well, thank you so much. That was wonderful, powerful testimony. And thank you for your translating. It was outstanding. We really appreciate it. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Jason West for our next panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Ms. Kawasaki and Ms. Byung, for translating. It's very powerful testimony, and we greatly appreciate that. I will be introducing our next panel. We have a panel of experts, NGO experts, to discuss their recommendations. The theme for the Commission on the Status of Women this year is 25 years of repression and regression for North Korean women. That's our theme, I'm sorry, for our event. The theme for the CSW was Beijing plus 25, looking at the progress of of all women's rights over the past 25 years. We'll be joined by Anne Buwalda, the Executive Director of Jubilee Campaign. Jubilee Campaign addresses religious freedom issues around the world and is also ECOSOC accredited and has sponsored our events at the UN these past years. We'll also be joined by John Sifton, the Asia Advocacy Director of Human Rights Watch, and we'll be joined by Greg Scarlatoiu, the Executive Director of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, HRNK. HRNK is a research organization based here in the DC area seeking to raise awareness about North Korean issues and publishing reports on the topic. So I will now turn it over to Ms. Buwalda, and then we will have time for a brief Q&A at the end after all three of our panel members have spoken. We'll again use the chat room to pose your questions, so please pose any questions there. So I will now turn it over to Ms. Buwalda.
As Jason mentioned, during this panel, we are examining 25 years of repression and regression for North Korean women. I would like to thank our distinguished witness, Eiko Kawasaki, for delivering her powerful testimony of her life in the oppressive DPRK and her admirable strength and courage to escape and share her story of repression of women in North Korea to the global human rights community. People like Ms. Kawasaki have given us a wealth of knowledge and otherwise unattainable, and have encouraged us to work even harder to expose the innumerable human rights violations that occur every day in North Korea under the Kim regime. Without Mrs. Kawasaki, we would not have much valuable or novel information to impart. So thank you, Ms. Kawasaki, for your commitment to the emancipation of all North Koreans who suffer under the regime's brutality. For decades, the fundamental and crucial human rights of the North Korean people remain unlawfully withheld, ignored, and infringed upon. Nothing short of excessive curtailment of speech, religion, media, and movement are the daily reality for those detained within the country's borders, not to mention the rampant starvation and poverty. These obstacles to obtaining a decent standard of life are suffered by every North Korean citizen, regardless of age or gender. However, the status of women is even more so precarious. In the most recent Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW report, which was submitted by the government of North Korea, there is no mention of steps taken to curb violence against women. This is concerning given the testimony we've just heard. Moreover, in a survey conducted by Human Rights Watch, defected women shared that domestic violence is such a common occurrence that it is seen as a shameful inevitability. Such failure to mention violence in their report displays the regime's unwillingness to genuinely work for the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action by overlooking the plethora of gendered violence within its borders. The UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in the DPRK further reveals that many North Korean female prisoners face one or a combination of the following human rights violations, including deliberative starvation, forced labor, executions, torture, rape, and the denial of reproductive rights enforced through punishment, forced abortion, and infanticide. Physical abuse even extends beyond the home and prison facilities to public employment, as we've just heard in Ms. Kawasaki's testimony. Many female trade workers fall victim to abuse from police and government officials. That is more often than not of a sexual nature. Everything from groping, penetrative body searches, and rape. These working women have no choice but to accept such abuse in order to avoid the threat of confiscated work permits and passports. North Korean women in the army or other military branches face unsanitary, overcrowded living conditions, insufficient food and drink, and humiliation. Malnourishment often causes female soldiers to stop menstruating for months to years at a time. The earlier mentioned summation in the CEDAW report of the DPRK's prioritization of action to address violence against women and girls does not correlate with such mentioned prevalent forms of violence. Its display of failure to combat or eliminate such violence. Now, that continues to be observed by human rights organizations and testified to by defectors and former victims. The reports are available. These novel surveys, reports, and testimonies contradict and disprove the bold claim by the North Korean government that, quote, sexual exploitation of women in no way is a social problem in the DPRK, unquote. We know that's not true. Within the community of North Korean women, a particular vulnerable group are those who have attempted to defect to other countries, but have unfortunately and unlawfully been repatriated back to North Korea in blatant violation of the 1951 Convention to the Relating of the Status of Refugees. That convention calls upon all states to ensure that the principle of non-refoulement is duly taken account of. Regrettably, it's not followed by China and other countries. The Committee for Human Rights on North Korea, HRNK, through interviews and research, has determined that at one specific North Korean detention center, 800 of 1,000 women, or 80% of female prisoners, were women who were forcibly repatriated to the DPRK, many of whom face severe physical torture, hard labor, and ideological training. Perhaps the most egregious act of violence and violation of human rights include the forced abortions that are unsafely and unethically performed upon repatriated women who have become pregnant during their time abroad. The Cornell International Law Journal states plainly and inarguably that this counters women's reproductive rights protected under the CEDAW and also violates the DPRK's own law that states pregnant women should be protected. The DPRK states in Article 6 of its CEDAW report that human trafficking is inconceivable in the DPRK, unquote. This is a blatant inaccuracy and misrepresentation of the life of North Korean women and much younger girls. In fact, Korea Future Initiative, an organization called Korea Future Initiative, reveals that a large portion of North Korean women who are sold into sex work or forced marriages in other nations are actually often approached and recruited in their home country, the DPRK. Despite such instances of trafficking, which are indisputably corroborated by defectors, the government of the DPRK makes no single mention of women who have been trafficked from within the country, nor the women who are repatriated, making effective action plans to help them or to end this form of violence. Those action plans are non-existent. In one Chinese city near the border, a nightclub specialized in the servicing of male customers by young North Korean women. Such businesses appear on the outside to be bars, hotels, or restaurants, but in actuality, these are brothels, where North Korean girls as young as 15 years old are forced to engage in sexual activity with male customers. Even though this business is located in China, it is funded and managed by the DPRK, which makes North Korean government officials responsible for such prostitution, trafficking, and human rights violations against women from other countries. Against women from within their own country. In fact, while the DPRK fruitlessly attempts to keep such trafficking problems a controlled secret, multiple nations within the Working Group on the Universal Periodic Review have come forth to make recommendations to North Korea government to impose criminal charges upon these traffickers and to draft legislation and policies to work towards eliminating sexual trafficking. The DPRK ignores it. It is with the above information, indisputable statistics, and powerful testimonies that we have come to the conclusion that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is unable and unmotivated to protect its women and girls. To quote UN Women, quote, "Women and girls everywhere must have equal rights and opportunity and be able to live free of violence and discrimination. Women's equality and empowerment is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but also integral to all dimensions of inclusive and sustainable development. In short, all the SDGs depend on the achievement of goal number 5. Unfortunately, the DPRK has continuously failed to meet goal number 5, as well as many of its qualifiers, including but not limited to The DPRK has failed to eliminate discrimination, violence, trafficking, exploitation, and forced marriage. The DPRK has refused to ensure women's equal participation in political and public life, as we heard in this Kawasaki's testimony. And it's also failed to ensure access to reproductive rights and health. In 1995, at the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing, the Beijing Platform was released for action, which requires states to do the following. States are to take measures to prevent, investigate, and punish acts of violence against women, create legislation to punish state officials who partake in acts of violence against women, eliminate sexual harassment in schools and the workplace, and take measures to eliminate sexual exploitation, pornography, prostitution, and sex tourism, unquote. These obligations all remain unmet by the DPRK. In fact, continued to be denied by the DPRK. A recent statement by the official party newspaper of the DPRK states, quote, "We cannot think about the dignity and status that we are now demonstrating on the global stage without the role of women," unquote. However, considering the information contained in this report, along with the international obligations of all member states, we can conclude that the DPRK is not actively striving to promote and ensure gender equality and is not working to protect the women of North Korea. We urge the DPRK to make genuine, calculable efforts toward the empowerment and protection of its women, and we call on member states to ensure that basic objectives and goals of all international obligations are met in order to prevent continued gendered abuse and human rights violations in the DPRK. With that, I turn it back to our panel moderator. Thank you.
I'll turn it over to John Sifton from Human Rights Watch now. Thank you, John. And thank you, Anne.
Okay, so I'm going to pull out and speak a little bit more generally about some of the human rights advocacy on North Korea that needs to be done about these issues, not just women's rights in North Korea, but the whole panoply of human rights issues that have been raised about North Korea in the last few years. So just a quick review. In the last decade, of course, the international consortium of human rights groups that work on North Korea, both international groups like mine, Human Rights Watch, and groups that work in Seoul and across Asia, you know, we've had a lot of successes in pressing the international community to be more vocal on human rights in North Korea. We created a UN Human Rights commission of inquiry for North Korea that reported to the UN Human Rights Council and ultimately ended up leading to the first debates in the history of the UN Security Council about the human rights situation in North Korea. These were immense successes and represented, you know, a new era in UN and international attention to human rights in North Korea. And we also learned that, you know, Kim Jong-un's government was incredibly sensitive to criticisms about human rights issues, and specifically the exposure of the specifics of human rights abuse in North Korea. Because I think everybody in the world knows human rights in North Korea are bad, but they don't know the details. And hearing the details, and in particular the details with respect to women's rights in North Korea, really energized the movement in many ways. And we learned that the Kim Jong-un government was incredibly sensitive to criticism about these issues, and in particular, suggestions that government officials, including Kim Jong-un himself, might be criminally liable for human rights violations, international crimes, including crimes against humanity. We were also incredibly relieved when the governments of South Korea and Japan were willing to engage in the effort to have an international pressure placed on North Korea. The U.S. government under the Obama administration had been quite active on this, but it was really important that the South Korean government and the Japanese government came along with those efforts, and that's what allowed the UN Human Rights Council to create the Commission of Inquiry. But let's be honest. I mean, when President Trump came into office, a lot of these efforts ended. And this is not a partisan issue. This isn't about Republicans or Democrats, and I'll get to that in a minute. The bottom line was that the Trump administration made an effort to prioritize diplomacy on counterproliferation issues, which, frankly, a Democrat might have done as well as a Republican. So, again, this is not a partisan issue. But the truth, and I think we need to be honest about this, is that the Trump administration put a great emphasis on prioritizing the diplomacy, and this came at the expense of pushing human rights issues. President Trump sought to rekindle diplomatic efforts on counterproliferation, de-emphasize human rights, and in doing so, he, I think, I wouldn't say he changed the government of Japan's mind, but Prime Minister Abe of Japan, I think as a very intelligent politician, recognized which way the Trump administration was going and went along in that direction as well. Meanwhile, the government of South Korea changed. A new government came in, which was much more willing to prioritize negotiations with the North. As a result of all of this, we have basically a situation where international attention on human rights to North Korea has flagged, has lessened. And that's where we are right now. And that is essentially the problem that the human rights community that focuses on North Korea is dealing with right now. So the question is what to do about that. At Human Rights Watch, our interpretation of the situation is that the best strategy for getting human rights back on the agenda is to prioritize the idea, to explain the idea that human rights and counterproliferation are linked, and that the human rights violations, including violations of women's rights, are linked to the fact that North Korea has a nuclear weapons program and a missile program, and that the abuses are linked to the program, that the cash generated by women's rights abuses both in North Korea and outside of North Korea is used to pay for the nuclear program. These are the types of arguments which I think possibly could impact policymakers within the Trump administration, within the Moon administration, and even Prime Minister Abe, to recognize that they need to weave human rights into negotiations with North Korea, and that you can't isolate them, and that you must include them in the discussions with Kim Jong-un about how to go forward. And in addition to the effects that human rights abuses have on the counterproliferation program, we would also like to make the argument that a successful counterproliferation regime, if it ever exists, will require North Korea to agree with will require North Korea to begin cooperating with UN mechanisms in a way that they never have before. Because the truth is you can't have successful counterproliferation and monitoring and verification unless there's better coordination with the UN system as a whole. So these are the arguments about linking counterproliferation and human rights that we want to make. And they're not arguments that I want to make or I like to make. I'm not a counterproliferation expert. I'm not a weapons proliferation expert. I'm not an arms control expert. But from a strategic perspective, it's occurred to us that to have success with the Abe regime, with President Trump, with President Moon, we have to make these strategic arguments about the connections between human rights and counterproliferation if we are going to convince them to resume raising human rights issues in the context of their negotiations with Kim Jong-un. That's the only way forward. Last thing I wanted to say was on a strategic perspective in Washington, and I can't speak to Seoul or the Diet in Tokyo. I defer to my colleagues who work in those countries, including Kanai, Doi, who was mentioned earlier, our Japan director. But in Washington, the key to making this case is in arguing to members of Congress. And the last good news I would leave you with before I turn it over to Greg is that there is one piece of good news. I work on many countries at Human Rights Watch, from Egypt to Afghanistan, many other countries. There are very few countries where there is as much agreement among members of Congress about strategy and foreign policy as North Korea. In fact, I can think of no country where there is more agreement about human rights issues than North Korea. It is something that brings together Democrats and Republicans on both sides in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And so I think that's our greatest strength, and we need to work it as much as we can by convincing members of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party to come together to press the Trump administration to put human rights back into the negotiations with Kim Jong-un. And that's what we're trying to do at Human Rights Watch in Washington, and what I urge everybody to do who cares about human rights in North Korea. So I'm sorry for the generality of all this, but those are our strategic points, and that's our strategic vision at Human Rights Watch. I'm glad to answer any questions about it in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for your comments. I'll now turn it over to Greg Scarlatoiu of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. And just a reminder, we will have a brief Q&A at the end. Please put your questions in the chat box, and we'll do our best to get to them with the time that we have available.
Terrific. Let me begin by congratulating Suzanne and Jason for putting together this event. It's surely not easy to overcome this coronavirus crisis. Events are getting canceled left and right in Washington, in New York City, elsewhere. I truly admire and commend your commitment. I would like to thank Ms. Kawasaki for sharing her experience and her memories of terrible times with us. It's never easy, and of course it's great to be in such select company with my good friends Anne Buwalda and John Sifton. The theme of the conference is, of course, 25 years of repression and regression of North Korean women. What we know that happened 25 years ago was the Great Famine, and as has already been stated by my colleagues, it has been North Korean women who have had to bear the brunt of the crisis. Over the past quarter century, North Korean women, who are very strong persons, have assumed primary responsibility for the survival of their families. It is women who are most active at the markets. It is women who leave the country without regime approval, assuming great risks to ensure, to do their best to ensure the survival of their families. And indeed, as stated by Anne, it is women who get arrested in China, forcibly repatriated in direct violation of China's obligations under the 1951 UN Convention concerning the status of refugees. It is women who are primarily oppressed and repressed and arrested at the markets for perceived wrongdoing. Ms. Kawasaki was discussing the coronavirus issue, since it is women who are on the front lines of survival, since it is women who have been primarily responsible for the miracle on the Taedong River, which has been really the survival of the North Korean people despite their own bad leadership. Since women are on the front lines, since the situation of hygiene, human security, health security, environmental security is so terrible in North Korea, it is regrettably probably reasonable to assume that indeed, as Ms. Kawasaki was saying, women will be very exposed to the risks of the coronavirus. In recent days, we have seen very good UN reports. We saw a report by the UN Special Rapporteur on human rights in the DPRK, Tommaso Quintana, a report that highlighted most of those egregious human rights violations being perpetrated in North Korea, in particular violations being perpetrated against North Korean women. Ample space is dedicated to women in that report. Reports of violence, sexual violence against women, extreme violence are included there. Today we have also seen the statement by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Honorable Michelle Bachelet. And indeed in this statement as well, the High Commissioner clearly states that monitoring by the United Nations indicates systematic human rights violations in detention centers in the DPRK, including sexual violence against women and girls. The High Commissioner also states that such violations appear to be taking place under the direct authority of two ministries, thus clearly stating that the North Korean regime is directly responsible for these violations. As John was saying, we used to have, hopefully we still have, a coalition of like-minded UN member states, a coalition that has been responsible for strong and serious measures at the UN Human Rights Council, the General Assembly. Since the February 2014 report of the UN Commission of Inquiry, this is a coalition that comprised us, the United States, the Republic of Korea, Japan, the European Union, and others, the Australians, New Zealand. Of course, we saw this issue of North Korean human rights being placed on the agenda of the UN Security Council 3 times in December 2015, 16, and 17, not in 2018 and not in 2019. It is very important to reignite interest in North Korean human rights, as John was saying. And since these key players, these governments are so keen on diplomacy, summit diplomacy in particular, somehow keen on sacrificing human rights on the altar of other pressing issues, political, security, military issues, the point that I would like to make is that the role of civil society will be extraordinarily important. That is why this type of effort by Suzanne and Jason is critical to keeping the issue of North Korean human rights, in particular the rights of North Korean women, at the top of the agenda. While commending the UN Special Rapporteur, Mr. Tommaso Quintana, for his report, I do have to say that I was a little bit surprised to see one recommendation in that report, in addition to, again, a lot of excellent findings and recommendations on human rights, a recommendation that the international community should listen to the voice of women across DMZ. As all of you know, I have written about this, so have others. This is not a group that is representative of the North Korean human rights movement, quite the contrary. Regrettably, under the current circumstances, the main problem civil society is facing is the fact that the voices of North Korean escapees in South Korea are being muffled, including the voices of North Korean women escapees. The problem is that the organizations have been defunded and disabled. So this is just my personal wish and hope that in future reports the Special Rapporteur will emphasize the need to give a voice to these defector, to these escapee groups whose voices are being muffled, rather than giving center stage to women across DMZ or groups that are actually trying to take the conversation into a very different direction. The statement by the High Commissioner, by the Honorable Bachelet, was a very good statement. If I were to express somehow regret over something that was not included in that statement, that was the very report of the UN Commission of Inquiry of February 2014. There was no mention of that report, and I was, just a few hours ago, I was corresponding with a luminary of human rights, in particular a luminary of North Korean human rights, who was noticing that even in the Honorable Bachelet's statement, one can see that there is this tendency to basically tiptoe, and that was the term used, tiptoe around North Korean human rights. It's very important for civil society to coalesce, to persuade, as John and Anne were saying, to persuade all branches of government, in particular our own U.S. Congress, to continue to focus on the importance of continuing to address North Korean human rights. It is not easy. There are major crises unfolding all over the world. There are other refugee crises, for example. The whole world is dealing with the coronavirus crisis right now. It is never easy across multiple administrations here in the United States. North Korean human rights has been out-competed, again, by political, military security issues. It's very heartening to see it. There's really, I think, a cultural issue here, a political cultural issue, that those negotiators in charge of political security, military issues tend to see human rights, I apologize if I'm being too blunt, as the crazy uncle you lock up in the attic and let out every now and then when you need to put a little bit of pressure on your negotiating counterpart. It is heartening to see that many of those senior officials who did not pay much attention to human rights when they were in a position of power, privilege, in a position where they could have made a difference, nevertheless, following those times in a private capacity or in an official capacity, now most of them, if not all of them, have become apostles and proponents of North Korean human rights. So I think there is hope. If you're in this line of work, you must have faith, you must have hope. So onward and upward. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Greg. Well, don't run away from us just yet, Greg. I'd like to ask Anne, Greg, and John if they would each turn their cameras and microphones on, and we'll have time for a Q&A session here. So let's just double check here. Everybody can hear us. I see Anne, and if John could join us too, that'd be great. So our first question comes from Britt, and she has a question for Greg and John. I'll let you two decide who takes it first. Do you think that the poor treatment of women in North Korean culture is a historic cultural trait passed down from the Chosun dynasty to Japanese colonization to the North Korean regime, or is it a symptom of totalitarian regime and the stress placed on men by the state manifesting in violence against women and girls? So the question is there in writing if you both need to consult that. It is a good question, but lengthy as well. So whoever would like to start?
I'm happy to.
Sure.
John, with your permission, may I take the first step on this one? Thank you.
Okay.
Certainly the result of totalitarianism and totalitarian politics. Of course, speaking of the Chosun dynasty, there are a lot of wonderful things about the Chosun dynasty, the literature, the culture, the music. That said, one of the reasons why the Kim regime in North Korea has managed to survive its peers in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe by 3 decades and accomplish 2 hereditary transmissions of power in the process is that North Koreans have known nothing but totalitarian systems. Stalinist communism, before that 40 years of ruthless, brutal Japanese imperial occupation period, 1905 to 1945, and before that, indeed, 500 years of Chosun feudal dynasty, politically speaking, a totalitarian political system. This is what makes things so difficult in North Korea today. The repression of women is no doubt the direct result of totalitarian politics.
Yeah,
John, if you have anything to add?
absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, totalitarianism is the issue here. The world is misogynistic and sexist. This country that I'm in right now is misogynistic and sexist. Almost every country in the world is. The problem with totalitarianism is it takes all of that and it puts it on steroids. It basically weaponizes the totalitarianism. It allows the natural misogyny that seems to exist in many cultures across our world to do things that never would be possible in other countries. It basically allows the misogyny to become far more violent and far, far more damaging than it would in this country, and in South Korea and in other countries. And that's how I would answer. I would basically say, like, look, I don't think that totalitarianism is creating the misogyny. It's weaponizing it. It's creating a situation where it's far more harmful.
Before we move on to the next question, Anne, did you have anything to add about totalitarianism and the effect on women and girls?
It seems to me that it's a continued oppression that women and girls have an incapacity, and they're so oppressed they don't have a way out. And I think what needs to happen is the DPRK, or at least the international community exposing the DPRK, needs to not only recognize that women and girls have no power, they have no capability of overcoming their circumstances or even speaking up. As the testimony was heard today, women and girls are so oppressed that their voice is completely silenced. And totalitarianism, of course, feeds into that and maintains an oppressive cover over the women's ability to speak out. And that's something which needs to be exposed, spoken out against, and hopefully equip women to overcome that. When you speak to defector women are exposing what's taking place in North Korea, but the North Korean women themselves are completely helpless to be able to speak out because they're so oppressed. If they try, all these types of violence already described takes place against them, and defector women who have escaped and then are returned likewise are brutalized. So the totalitarian nature of the regime, and even the Chinese government, which props up the regime, is to completely remove from women any capability to speak up or to change their circumstances. And until that wall is broken down, or that window is cracked and shattered, actually, it needs to be shattered, where women can actually speak up, speak out, and be a full participant in the society, which they aren't now.
Thank you very much for that, Anne. We have another question here. The role of the U.S. has been raised. What role does ROK, South Korea, play in the rights of North Korean women? John, would you like to start on that?
Yeah. So we have written, not just we, a collection of human rights groups have written to President Moon with a sense of profound disappointment at his government's recent abdication of responsibility in pressuring the North on their human rights record. It's been a very disappointing last 12 months with President Moon agreeing to repatriate 2 North Korean fishermen who were caught there, but more importantly, abandoning their role at the United Nations to pressure the North on human rights issues. I understand the politics, and I understand what's going on, but it doesn't excuse the fact that there was a agreement, there was a sense that we were moving towards pressuring the North on human rights. The president of South Korea has made a decision to go in the other direction, to go in reverse. And that's what brings me back to the point I made about counterproliferation. I fear that the decisions that are being made right now about North Korea policy are not being made strategically. They are not being made with an eye towards what is the most impactful way that we can impact North Korea's decision-making on both nuclear weapons, missile technology, and human rights, but rather the decision is being made, what can we do that will best curry favor with the Trump administration? And that's a big problem. We basically need to get the South Korean government to move towards focusing on the strategic aims here. And whether that's through the legislature or through the newspapers in Seoul or through other means, I can't speak to because I'm not an expert in South Korean politics. But I do recognize what's going on here at the geopolitical level between the United States and Washington, and the United States and Seoul, and I'm very worried. And I think the South Korean government really needs to move in a new direction.
Greg, did you have anything to add to that?
We also participated in this effort led by Human Rights Watch. We co-signed the same two letters. What's really mind-boggling here is that we never received an answer from the Blue House. We never received acknowledgement. You had this vast group of international NGOs, very well-known figures within the human rights movement, luminaries, the current special rapporteur on human rights in the DPRK, a previous human rights on the rapporteur on the human rights situation in the DPRK, no answer, none whatsoever. So I think that is a sad testament to the state of South Korean diplomacy today. Just a few years ago, this is a country and a government that used to act as a regional and global leader engaged in peacekeeping, humanitarian development operations worldwide, a host of the G20 summit, fully engaged with the United Nations, fully assuming leadership on so many issues, including DPRK human rights, and now the message is simply ignored. I would slightly disagree with John. I think the order is different here. I don't think that the Moon government is trying to please President Trump in any shape or form. One has to remember that President Moon was chief of staff to the late President Roh Moo-hyun, is part of that core of progressives that pushed for the sunshine policy of unconditional investment and aid bestowed upon the Kim regime while completely disregarding the human rights situation. So I think that there's a long history there that cannot be blamed on the Trump administration here in the United States.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not an expert on South Korean politics. I just wish that there was more strategic thinking in the Blue House about what's going to impact this government in the North, and I just don't see that.
Great point.
Anne, did you have anything to add to that as well?
Yeah, it's my opinion that there's definitively a fear. It's a retrogression by the South Korean government currently. I mean, I remember when I first got started in this activity back in 2002, you couldn't get South Korea to say anything about North Korean human rights. They either ran away from the rooms or escaped from the UN rooms where votes were taking place, pretended not to even exist on the peninsula. It was so awful. Then you had a period of great boldness, and it seems now that there's a complete retrogression and almost fear of the North. And, you know, Greg may be right that it could be the current administration in South Korea is reviewing their role, and it's definitely encouraging North Korean violations of human rights, because there's nothing said about it, nothing spoken about it, and completely capitulating in many respects of how they should be handling exposing human rights violations in the North. Remember, all of North Korea, all of the population on the Korean Peninsula are citizens of South Korea, according to South Korea's own constitution. Hence, South Korea has the right and ought to be speaking out where the North is violating rights, including women's rights, including quite a variety of rights. So South Korea is completely capitulating its role at the UN and various forums, and certainly is not performing a role that's constructive.
That's a very important point. That's a really important point, because the International Criminal Court potentially has jurisdiction on the basis of South Korea's ascension to the Rome Statute, which created the International Criminal Court. And if they were really serious about pursuing international accountability, then they would pursue that angle, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much to all three of you. I am going to just pose one last question, and then if you would like to wrap up with any brief closing remarks for each of the three of you. The question from the audience was, do you see any type of civil society forming in North Korea? So if you'd each like to take a shot at that one, and then give us any closing remarks, any hope for the future, any advice on how people can get involved, or all of the above. So John, why don't you start with that?
Civil society in North Korea, that's a novel idea. I'd like to see it in, I mean, look, I'll be real. In Vietnam, which is a one-party communist state, there are civil society groups. There have been groups that have come together and created themselves around innocuous, or when I say innocuous, I say, what I mean is issues that the government considers to be innocuous. Disability rights, perhaps. Children's rights. So it's happened, and it's conceivable, and it's a toehold. But from everything we understand about human rights in North Korea, that's not happening anytime soon. Mm-hmm. And so anything that's going on in North Korea right now is clandestine, is very secretive, and it's going to remain that way for the time being.
Thank you very much. Any closing remarks?
No, just thank you for doing this, and I'm so sorry that it had to be virtually, but I'm so glad you did this.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Sifton. Greg, any thoughts on civil society in North Korea, and any closing remarks?
For a population of 25 million people, there are 270,000 agents of 3 internal security agencies. The degree of surveillance, control, coercion, and punishment is absolutely overwhelming. For that reason, despite people coalescing around the markets and perhaps trust playing more of a role than it did until a few years ago, the degree of social cohesion in North Korea is still very low. I mentioned one particular group by name earlier. These groups go into North Korea and meet with so-called civil society groups. These are not real civil society groups. These are not real labor unions. They're simply paper unions and paper groups established under the strict authority and guidance of the Korean Workers' Party and the North Korean regime. As John said, I agree. If there is a semblance of civil society, it is on the ground. Very possibly the underground Christian churches of North Korea that operate despite grave danger. The regime fears them greatly for two main reasons: because they propose a religion, let's say, an ideology that competes against the regime's official ideology, and also because they create, forgive me for using the term, a safe space for discussion amongst these members of the underground churches.
Thank you very much, Greg. Any closing remarks?
Again, kudos to you and Suzanne for putting this together and bringing all of us together. I know how difficult it is. We are all in the midst of it. It's an extraordinarily important issue. Remember, North Korean women have been the reason why the people of North Korea have survived through very difficult times, despite their terrible leadership. It is very important to continue to keep this issue in focus, and hopefully next year around this time we'll be back in New York City pressing hard on this issue, promoting this issue.
Absolutely. Thank you, Greg. And Anne, any thoughts on civil society in North Korea?
Well, I think what needs to continue to happen is that the international community needs to expose the DPRK's false claims, because they're claiming and they're portraying oftentimes, whether it's a church or a civil society organization as existing, and they're making claims about their independence when they're completely controlled, as has been stated. So when the DPRK makes statements to CEDAW or makes statements to the UN, all of those statements of denial of what defectors say or what reports have exposed demonstrates that they're not willing to come forward and change. And until the DPRK actually acknowledges that they have a problem, they're not going to invite the international community in. At what point is it that the international community has to actually step in? And that's a question that we've had for so long. At what point does that happen? I think the primary way currently of stepping in is through radio transmissions and other avenues of trying to get information into the hands of the North Korean citizens. Once they get that information, it may enable them to be set free. But until they have accurate information about what's happening in the outside world, they're continuing to be oppressed, and the North Korean government continues to oppress them. So I encourage all civil society groups in the international community to continue to support North Korean broadcasting by North Korean defectors back into North Korea, and other avenues of getting information in, because that's going to be a key to freeing the population to knowing what the truth is and what's really happening in the world. So as a closing, I would also like to thank all of those participating this evening. Thank you for all the guests that are participating this evening. We hope that all of you will take the word about North Korea and spread it far and wide, that the DPRK can't be doing what they're doing in silence anymore.
All right. Thank you very much, Anne, for those remarks. That is the conclusion of our web conference, so thank you everybody for joining. I would remind you to please visit our website. The North Korea Freedom Coalition can be found at nkfreedom.org. We are also on Facebook and Twitter, so please follow us, like us, all of the above. And please also do follow our speakers as well. You can find their information on our pages as well. So please do continue to get involved with these sort of events and organizations. We will have more of these events in the future, and we're very appreciative that you took the time out of your schedule. And with all hope, we will be back in New York next year for the next Commission on the Status of Women for an in-person event. So with that, thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you.